What if I told you that one of the most famous car guys on television built his entire empire on a lie? That behind the cameras, the beer-chugging bravado, and the million-dollar deals was a criminal operation so sophisticated it fooled collectors worldwide for nearly a decade. Richard Rawlings didn't just flip cars, he flipped reality itself. And when federal investigators finally cracked open his secret world, what they found was so shocking it sent shockwaves through the entire automotive industry. This isn't just about fake paperwork or inflated prices. This is about a man who weaponized his celebrity status to orchestrate one of the largest automotive fraud schemes in American history. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how Rawlings built his house of cards, why it took so long to catch him, and how a single VIN number brought down a $50 million empire. But first, let me show you the moment everything changed. The day Richard Rawlings collapsed in federal court and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. For over a decade, Richard Rawlings was the undisputed king of car television. Fast and Loud wasn't just a show. It was a phenomenon that turned a small Dallas garage into a global brand worth tens of millions. Rawlings had the perfect formula: find rare cars in impossible places, restore them with theatrical flair, and sell them for astronomical profits. But here's what his millions of fans didn't know. Those barn finds weren't discoveries, they were carefully orchestrated deceptions. Those one-of-a-kind classics weren't rare, they were regular cars with fabricated identities. And those record-breaking sales weren't legitimate transactions. They were elaborate cons targeting wealthy collectors around the world. Today, I'm going to take you inside the rise and catastrophic fall of Richard Rawlings. We'll explore how he built his criminal empire, the sophisticated methods he used to fool experts, and the federal investigation that ultimately brought him down. You'll see how a routine IRS audit uncovered a secret room filled with VIN stamping equipment, how former employees revealed the truth about Gas Monkey's hidden operations, and how a single $1.2 million car sale became the smoking gun that sealed his fate. This story has everything: celebrity deception, international fraud, and a courtroom collapse that marked the end of one of television's biggest automotive personalities. Let's dive into the shocking truth behind the Gas Monkey empire. Richard Rawlings didn't just stumble into fame, he engineered it with the precision of a master manipulator. Understanding how he built his seemingly untouchable public image is crucial to grasping how he got away with massive fraud for so long. From the very beginning, Rawlings understood something that most people miss. In the world of classic cars, authenticity isn't just about the vehicle, it's about the person selling it. He crafted a persona that was part Texas cowboy, part rock star, and completely irresistible to car enthusiasts. The backward baseball cap, the ever-present beer, the larger-than-life personality, none of it was accidental. But here's where it gets really clever. Rawlings didn't just build a brand around himself, he built a mythology. Every episode of Fast and Loud reinforced the same narrative. Richard Rawlings had an almost supernatural ability to find rare cars that others couldn't. He'd walk into a barn that hadn't been opened in decades and somehow discover a pristine muscle car worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The odds of this happening once are astronomical. The odds of it happening repeatedly, impossible. Yet viewers believed it because Rawlings sold the dream so convincingly. He understood that people didn't just want to watch car restoration. They wanted to believe in magic. They wanted to believe that somewhere out there incredible automotive treasures were just waiting to be discovered by someone with the right eye and enough determination. This carefully constructed image became Rawlings' most powerful weapon. When he told collectors that a car was authentic, they believed him not because of the paperwork, though that was expertly forged, but because of who he was. His celebrity status acted as a form of authentication more powerful than any document. The psychology behind this is fascinating and terrifying. Rawlings exploited what experts call celebrity halo effect, the tendency for people to assume that someone famous in one area must be trustworthy in related areas. Because he was successful on television, collectors assumed he must be honest in business. Because he seemed passionate about cars, they believed his passion guaranteed authenticity. But perhaps most insidiously, Rawlings used his show as a 24/7 marketing platform for his fraudulent activities. Every episode wasn't just entertainment, it was an infomercial for his criminal enterprise. He would feature cars on the show, build their backstories with dramatic flair, and then sell them to collectors who had watched their discovery on television. The federal prosecutors later argued that Fast and Loud wasn't just a TV show, it was the most expensive marketing campaign for a criminal operation in history. Discovery Channel was unknowingly funding and broadcasting advertisements for fraudulent car sales to millions of viewers worldwide. This is why Rawlings' crimes were so devastating when they were finally exposed. He didn't just steal money, he stole trust. He weaponized the very passion that brought car enthusiasts together and used it to exploit them. The man who claimed to celebrate automotive history was actually destroying it, one fake VIN at a time. What federal investigators discovered when they raided Gas Monkey Garage wasn't just shocking. It was a masterclass in criminal sophistication that had been operating in plain sight for nearly 8 years. The scope and complexity of Rawlings' operation reveals just how far he was willing to go to maintain his fraudulent empire. The centerpiece of this criminal enterprise was what employees called the cage, a hidden section of Gas Monkey Garage that didn't appear on any building plans or insurance documents. This wasn't some hastily assembled corner where paperwork was fudged. This was a professional-grade forgery operation that would have impressed the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Inside this secret room, investigators found equipment that told the entire story. Industrial VIN stamping machines capable of creating authentic-looking vehicle identification numbers, precision welding tools for seamlessly altering frame stampings, and a complete document production facility with high-end printers, aged paper stock, and even vintage ink formulations to create period-appropriate paperwork. But the most chilling discovery was the systematic nature of the operation. Rawlings hadn't just stumbled into fraud, he had industrialized it. Federal prosecutors found detailed records showing that over 200 vehicles had been processed through this hidden facility over 6 years. Each car followed the same pattern: acquire a common classic car, research which rare variants would be most valuable, then systematically transform the vehicle's identity to match that valuable variant. The process was disturbingly thorough. First, the original VIN would be carefully removed and replaced with a number that matched a rare model. Then, supporting documentation would be created: build sheets showing the car's supposed original specifications, dealer invoices indicating its sale to a famous owner, and even maintenance records spanning decades. Every document was aged, weathered, and made to look authentic enough to fool expert appraisers. What made this operation particularly insidious was how Rawlings used his legitimate business to cover the illegal one. While Fast and Loud filmed in the main garage bays, the real work happened in the shadows. Legitimate restorations provided cover for the fraudulent ones. Real car deals masked the fake ones. The TV show's success generated so much revenue and attention that no one questioned the additional income from private sales. Former employees who testified during the trial painted a picture of an operation run with military precision. Only Rawlings and 3 trusted associates had access to the cage. Work was done during off hours when film crews weren't present. Cars would enter the facility as common classics and emerge weeks later as documented rarities worth 10 times their original value. The psychological manipulation extended to his own employees. Those who expressed concerns were told they were thinking too small, or didn't understand the big picture. One former worker testified that Rawlings created an environment where questioning the authenticity of cars was seen as disloyalty to the Gas Monkey brand. This wasn't just fraud, it was a complete parallel reality where regular cars became legends, common finds became miraculous discoveries, and criminal activity was disguised as passionate craftsmanship. The sophistication of this operation explains how Rawlings maintained his deception for so long, and why the eventual collapse was so devastating. Of all the fraudulent transactions that Richard Rawlings orchestrated during his criminal career, none was more devastating to his case, or more personally heartbreaking for his victims, than the sale of what he called his crown jewel, a supposed 1967 Shelby GT500 that sold for $1.2 million to a European collector. This wasn't just another fraudulent sale. This was the perfect storm that combined Rawlings' most sophisticated deception techniques with his most callous exploitation of fan loyalty. The story of this car reveals not just how the fraud worked, but why it was so personally devastating to those who trusted him. The collector, a successful businessman from Germany who had followed Gas Monkey Garage for years, wasn't just buying a car, he was buying a piece of automotive history that he had watched being discovered on Fast and Loud. The episode featuring this car was pure Rawlings theater. dramatic music, passionate speeches about automotive heritage, and the host's personal guarantee that this was the find of a lifetime. But here's what the collector didn't know. The car wasn't a GT 500 at all. It was a standard 1967 Mustang that had been systematically transformed into something it never was. The VIN had been altered, the engine bay had been modified to accept the wrong power plant, and every piece of supporting documentation had been fabricated in the secret room at Gas Monkey Garage. The deception was so complete that it fooled multiple appraisers during the initial sale. The car looked right, the paperwork seemed authentic, and most importantly, it came with Richard Rawlings' personal guarantee. In recorded phone calls played during the trial, you can hear Rawlings telling the collector, "I would never stake my reputation on anything that wasn't 100% authentic. This car is the real deal, and I'm putting my name behind it." The fraud began to unravel when the collector attempted to insure the vehicle through a European company that specialized in high-value classics. Their authentication process was more rigorous than American insurers, and red flags immediately appeared. The VIN didn't match Shelby production records. The build sheet contained inconsistencies that experts recognized. Most damning of all, metallurgical analysis of the frame showed that key components had been welded and modified, something that would never happen on an original GT 500. When confronted with this evidence, the collector's world collapsed. In his videotaped testimony played during the trial, you can see the genuine pain in his eyes as he describes feeling completely betrayed by someone I admired. He had followed Rawlings for years, bought Gas Monkey merchandise, and even visited the garage as a fan. The fraud wasn't just financial, it was deeply personal. This case became the centerpiece of the federal prosecution because it demonstrated every element of Rawlings' criminal operation: the use of his TV show to market fraudulent goods, the sophisticated forgery techniques, the exploitation of fan loyalty, and the international scope that made it a federal crime. The $1.2 million loss was devastating enough, but the emotional betrayal was worse. This collector, like so many others, had believed in the Gas Monkey dream. He had trusted that Rawlings' passion for cars guaranteed honesty. Instead, he discovered that his hero was a criminal who had weaponized that very passion against him. The downfall of Richard Rawlings began not with dramatic raids or whistleblower revelations, but with something far more mundane: a routine IRS audit that spiraled into the largest automotive fraud investigation in federal history. Understanding how this investigation unfolded reveals just how sophisticated Rawlings' criminal operation had become, and how a single mistake brought it all crashing down. In late 2023, IRS auditors began what they expected to be a standard review of Gas Monkey Garage's quarterly filings. These audits happened thousands of times each year, usually resulting in minor adjustments and paperwork corrections. But within days, the auditors knew they had stumbled onto something much bigger. The first red flag was the business expenses. Rawlings had been claiming massive deductions for automotive research and acquisition trips that included luxury hotel stays, expensive meals, and private jet flights. When auditors cross-referenced these expenses with the cars actually acquired during those periods, the numbers didn't add up. The claimed expenses were often 10 times higher than the value of the vehicles supposedly purchased. But it was the discovery of overseas financial transactions that transformed a tax audit into a criminal investigation. Hidden in the complex web of Gas Monkey's corporate structure were wire transfers to shell companies in countries known for banking secrecy. These transfers, totaling over $15 million, had never been reported to the Treasury Department as required by federal law. The breakthrough came when auditors discovered a VIN that shouldn't exist. A car sold for $400,000 carried an identification number that didn't match any known production records. When investigators traced this ghost VIN through the federal database, they found something shocking. It was one of dozens of similar anomalies connected to Gas Monkey sales. This discovery triggered what federal prosecutors later called the most complex automotive fraud investigation in bureau history. The FBI's white-collar crime unit, working with automotive experts from the National Insurance Crime Bureau, began systematically examining every high-value sale connected to Rawlings over the previous 8 years. What they found was a criminal enterprise of staggering scope. The investigation revealed that Rawlings hadn't just committed isolated acts of fraud, he had created an entire parallel automotive market based on fabricated vehicles and forged documentation. The sophistication of the operation required expertise in metallurgy, document forgery, automotive history, and international finance. The federal raid on Gas Monkey Garage was conducted with military precision. Over 40 agents simultaneously searched multiple locations, seizing computers, financial records, and the contents of the secret forgery room. The timing was crucial. Investigators had learned that Rawlings was planning to destroy evidence and flee the country. Perhaps most damaging was the cooperation of former employees who had been waiting for years to tell their stories. 3 key witnesses provided detailed testimony about the hidden operations, the pressure to participate in fraudulent activities, and Rawlings' personal involvement in every aspect of the criminal enterprise. The federal case that emerged was overwhelming. 18 separate counts, including wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. Each count carried potential prison time, and the evidence was so comprehensive that Rawlings' defense team knew from the beginning that their client was facing decades behind bars. This investigation proved that no matter how sophisticated a criminal operation becomes, it only takes one mistake to bring it all down. The final chapter of Richard Rawlings' criminal saga played out in a federal courtroom in Dallas, where the man who had once commanded television audiences and million-dollar deals faced the ultimate reckoning for his crimes. What happened during those 3 weeks of testimony, and in the moments after his sentencing, revealed the true cost of his deception. The prosecution's case was devastating in its completeness. Federal attorneys presented a mountain of evidence that painted Rawlings not as a passionate car enthusiast who made mistakes, but as a calculating criminal who had systematically defrauded collectors for nearly a decade. They played clips from Fast and Loud episodes, showing Rawlings promoting cars that were later proven to be fraudulent. They presented expert testimony from automotive historians, who explained the statistical impossibility of Rawlings' claimed discoveries. Most damaging of all, they brought forward the victims, collectors from around the world who had trusted Rawlings and lost everything. The defense strategy was predictable but ultimately futile. Rawlings' attorneys tried to portray him as a passionate but naive businessman who had been manipulated by others. They argued that his love of cars had made him too trusting, too willing to believe in the authenticity of vehicles brought to him by suppliers. But this narrative crumbled under the weight of evidence showing Rawlings' direct involvement in every aspect of the fraud. The testimony of former employees was particularly damaging. These weren't disgruntled workers seeking revenge. They were people who had genuinely admired Rawlings and been devastated to discover the truth about his operations. Their detailed accounts of the secret room, the forged documents, and Rawlings' personal oversight of fraudulent activities left no doubt about his guilt. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty on all 18 counts. The speed of their decision reflected the overwhelming nature of the evidence. There was simply no reasonable doubt about Rawlings' guilt, but it was the sentencing that provided the most dramatic moment in this entire saga. Judge Alanir Simmons didn't just impose a prison term, she delivered a scathing condemnation of Rawlings' crimes and their impact on victims worldwide. "You didn't just steal money," she said. "You stole trust. You weaponized the very passion that brings car enthusiasts together and used it to exploit them." When the judge announced the sentence, 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 10 years, Rawlings' carefully maintained composure finally cracked. The man who had built his career on larger-than-life performances gave his final one, a complete physical collapse that required medical intervention. The image of Rawlings being wheeled out of the courtroom on a stretcher, oxygen mask covering his face, became the defining moment of his downfall. This wasn't the defiant exit of a man who believed in his innocence. It was the complete breakdown of someone who finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost. Within hours of the verdict, the Gas Monkey empire began its final collapse. Discovery Channel severed all ties, episodes were pulled from streaming platforms, and sponsors fled. The brand that had taken decades to build was destroyed in a matter of days. The rise and fall of Richard Rawlings is more than just a story about automotive fraud. It's a cautionary tale about the dangerous intersection of celebrity, trust, and criminal ambition. For nearly a decade, Rawlings proved that with enough charisma and the right platform, you can convince people to believe almost anything. But this story also reveals something hopeful. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it's buried. The federal investigators who brought down Rawlings didn't just solve a crime. They restored integrity to an industry that had been corrupted by one man's greed. The victims of Rawlings' fraud are still recovering, both financially and emotionally. Many have lost not just money but also their faith in the automotive community they once loved. The classic car market is still dealing with the aftermath, as collectors and auction houses work to identify and remove fraudulent vehicles from circulation. As for Richard Rawlings himself, he's now serving his sentence in federal prison, with no possibility of parole until 2034. The man who once lived like a rock star now faces the reality of spending the next decade behind bars, his empire reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. The Gas Monkey garage building still stands in Dallas, but it's empty now, a hollow reminder of what happens when ambition crosses the line into criminality. The cars are gone, the cameras have stopped rolling, and the only sound is the echo of what once was. This case should serve as a warning to anyone who thinks celebrity status makes them untouchable. It should remind us all that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. And it should make us more careful about who we choose to believe, especially when millions of dollars and our deepest passions are at stake. The Richard Rawlings story is over, but its lessons will echo through the automotive world for generations to come. Sometimes the most expensive education comes from watching someone else's spectacular failure. What shocked you most about Richard Rawlings' criminal operation? Was it the sophistication of the fraud, the betrayal of his fans' trust, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and respond to as many as I can. If you found this deep dive into automotive crime fascinating, make sure you're subscribed, because next week I'm investigating another shocking scandal that rocked the car world. You won't want to miss it. And if you know someone who's a car enthusiast or a fan of true crime stories, share this video with them. Stories like this need to be told so that future victims can protect themselves from similar scams. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next investigation.